while we're setting up the mic and everything else, I just want to ask Mr. Krishnan, are you able to see us, hear us very well, Krishnan?
I can see you and I can hear you very clearly. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you were planning to be here in person, and then I know that some last minute changes that you couldn't join us in person, but this is as good as it gets at this point in time. So thank you again for spending the time in the morning. So Krishnan, I know that we have very limited time, so I want to right away get into some of the questions which are on our minds, and potentially would like to get your views on and thoughts around some of those. So let's start with something which is probably closer to your heart. You've had almost 35 years of illustrious career in the government, especially leading technology and then impact of technology on the broader population and human and so on and so forth. Now, recently, of course, the India AI mission is something which is, your baby, if I may call it that way, as well as semiconductor mission and a few other initiatives. So my question, because we are in a Deeptech startup conference today, I want to ask you, how do you see some of these broader schemes of the government, predominantly central government, but also to some extent some of the state governments, how do they impact or how do they help the Deeptech ecosystem, which is what the audience today in this room are going to be concerned about? So I want to sort of paint sort of a bigger picture and let you sort of take us through your thinking around what the impact on this population is going to be.
Thank you, and thank you very much for making this happen and letting me join you virtually today. Clearly, I mean, this is again a technology overlay which allows us to do this, and also the true resilience of, and nowadays, most of the talk is about resilience, and so true resilience of Bangalore, that despite the heavy rains and despite all that is happening there, the event is up and happening, and all of you are doing what you do best, which is talk about technology and what can happen with technology. I think the crucial thing which we are increasingly finding in the country is that technology is overlaying just about every sector. And the digital technology and emerging technology, in a sense, is becoming something which is very horizontal and cutting across every segment of the economy, and therefore it is something that every segment of the economy needs to adapt or adopt in order to go forward and in order to grow. Now, that being the case, in the various missions that the government launches, there are very many which are very directly relevant and very directly impact the deep tech sector. The India AI mission has a large chunk of money which is fundamentally designed to help innovation, and specifically innovation by startups and innovative companies in the deep tech sector. Likewise, in the semiconductor mission, there is a large amount of money which is set apart for design-linked incentive, which again is fundamentally about design and design technology, which can actually take it to the next level. The quantum mission, which is led by the Department of Science and Technology, but where, as Secretary of MeitY, I'm a member of that group as well. There is a lot of work which is going on as to how quantum technology can be applied. We now have a national blockchain framework which the ministry has put out, and where the funding may not be as much, but an enabling framework is being created for deep tech enterprises to work on. So clearly, we have both the funding and we have the policy support that deep tech enterprises would require. And if there is any other enabling requirement that they have, the government would be very happy to support that. I do understand that there could be, especially in areas like this, there could be some ease of doing business issues. which require attention from time to time and which are brought to our notice and which we take up with the relevant entities, whether it is the Ministry of Finance or people in the Labor Ministry and so on. And really, ultimately, from while there could be a lot of economic value which is generated in terms of products directed at niche markets and niche customers, for the ministry itself, one of the key areas of interest is, how does the application of technology of this nature and deep technology improve things for the common man? What is it that what is in it for them? How do better quality of services get delivered? How do we ensure that overall productivity and efficiency of various services that people use are used more effectively? One very critical approach there, where there's been a lot of public-private partnership, has been in the way that DPIs have emerged, digital public infrastructure has emerged, and Bangalore has been a kind of the nerve center where a lot of this has initially come out. And the DPI support is also something that the ministry is continuing to do. And that is a message we are spreading not only for the rest of India through the India Stack and through the global India Stack and so on, but also through a number of memorandum of understanding and other forms of agreements with other countries of the global south. Today, in many international fora, India has been recognized as a digital power and is being recognized as a source for a lot of digital applications which can be shared with the global south and which would be much cheaper and more effective options for them to use. So I think there are a number of these areas which would be very relevant to deep tech startups who form part of the audience of this particular gathering.
Thank you, Krishnan. I think it was spot on. I think the ability, and then you mentioned a few examples, including the DPI. nasscom actually published a Deeptech report earlier this year, and then today you saw another report getting released. And we highlighted 3 big challenges for the deep tech ecosystem. And they were very simple, and it's not very complicated, right? It is 1, patient capital, 2, market access, and 3 was skill talent. These are the 3 big issues faced by the deep tech ecosystem. So if you focus on the patient capital, countries like, for example, the US, Israel to some extent, have large grant models that supports innovation in research and very strategic areas. So the question is, while we do have startup funds that you talk about, Krishnan, is there a different approach needed for certain key deep tech segments that will be key for India's growth? I mean, do you see, other than the startup funds, are there other things that we need to be looking at as well?
Certainly. I think in addition to the startup funds which are available under the various missions that I already mentioned and which are significantly larger than what is given under a regular startup grant program, for instance, in the DLI scheme or in the quantum mission, and even in the AI mission, the startup funding on a grant basis can go up to almost about 50 crores in each case. Though in some cases, to be very honest, even from the startup community, we are getting a pushback saying, please don't make grants, please try and see if there is a kind of a deferred equity kind of model that you can follow for a number of other reasons. But in addition to this, I think the research funding which the government is prepared to do is also very substantial. Many ministries, including MeitY, have substantial research funds, and we would like to actually partner with industry in order to make available the research fund. MeitY's own research budget has grown significantly. The year I got here, just the year before I got here in 22-23, they spent about 600 crores. But this year we are aiming to spend nearly 1,200 crores, and that is going upwards. So there's a substantial amount of research funding. It is a challenge to find good projects which can be backed. We are looking for industry with whom we can work. And if the industry even comes up with, say, 20-25% of the funding, we are prepared to put in the rest of the money where there's a partnership with an academic institution. In certain cases, industries, certain kinds of industries even ask us saying, do we need to necessarily partner with an academic institution because it may slow down the pace of what we want to do, which is much more specific. So there are cases where we are even prepared to fund industry directly. But that, in addition to MeitY's own budget, you're aware of Anusandhan, the National Research Fund, which has recently been formed. That's an even larger corpus which can support a number of, research and development projects. That takes projects up to, say, TRL 3 or 4 level. And in the budget this year, a pool of research and development funding of almost 1 lakh crore has been announced by the government, which will take it from TRL 3 and 4 to about TRL 7 and 8. So that again is a pool of funding which will be available. A lot of that will be available for deep tech startups in a range of areas. And in certain other specific areas, like in defense technology, you have the IDEX support, which is again fairly substantial, and the BIRAC model, which again has been spoken of by many people. So all of this, I think the avenues of research funding are fairly substantial. And what I find very often is that sometimes, the same research project initially comes to us in MeitY, it also goes to DST. If there's a little bit of delay or something happens on our side, then some other ministry has already funded it. So there are multiple options that can be tried at the same time so that at one place or the other, the financing gets made.
That's wonderful. I think when you look at, thank you for calling out various options that you spoke about. I think one thing which nasscom could help with is sort of making sure that we are able to channel them in the right way, and then ability for us to sort of have as a sort of a one-stop, whether it's a deep tech club that we get involved with the companies as well as the COE and then things like that. I also want to see if there are any questions from the audience for Mr. Krishnan. Please do come over, and then we can take your questions as well. But I'm going to ask one more question. I mean, if you have any questions, get them ready, and then see if you can come up. Maybe somewhere if you can give them a mic, they can ask the question as well. But while we're getting ready with the questions from the audience, market access broadly, we always talk about market access outside of India. But I also have a question for you, Mr. Krishnan, on the market access within India. Right? So many startups have pivoted to global markets, as we know, while we are seeing a few fintech companies re-pivoting to the Indian market. So obviously more and more support is required for market access in India. So under the AI mission, you are building several innovation challenges wherein startups will build solutions. So is there a plan to ensure that the startups which qualify for these challenges not only just build the POCs, but are also eligible for procurement opportunities so that they can see the implementation at scale? I hope the question was clear. So it's more about what they can do in India working with AI missions.
No, I think what is very clear, and it's not just with reference to the AI mission, but by and large, under the public procurement order and the Make in India program currently, we are very keen to encourage procurement from within India of various services and various products which can be developed here. And secondly, there are a number of relaxations which will enable startups to actually participate in many of these procurements. And sometimes these procurements are just off the street. I mean, I remember a recent case where, next to my office here, where I'm sitting right now, which is the Electronics Niketan, next to that is a scope building, and they have a small space for exhibitions there. And there was a cybersecurity conference held there a few months ago, and when I visited the conference, there were also a set of startups, cybersecurity startups, which were making pitches there. And there was a particular area that we were interested in the cybersecurity space at that point. We had discussions, and one of the startups seemed to have a solution of the kind that we had in mind. And I picked up their card and came back and then asked our team to sort of check with them as to how we can actually access what they have. And we were able to build a relationship very quickly, as simple as that. There is a possibility of having a preference for actually within the government system procuring services which are offered by startups for a variety of solutions that they build. And in tech areas, because really there's a lot of innovation which is needed, and most of that innovation really comes from startups. And it has been possible for us to do that. There are other cases also of procuring from startups. And there are cases there are relaxations available under the GFR, which are the provisions which dictate government procurement, which allow relaxation of experience conditions, turnover conditions, and so on to enable startups to participate in various bids and also not have very onerous requirements of performance security and bid security so that they're able to participate without too much of friction. We can sort of, we have the MeitY Startup Hub. We can also enable them to come and speak to startups in terms of what are the advantages of procurement and what are the ways in which at least market access to the government markets would be available. And government markets increasingly are also online markets. GEM portal is another example where a number of startups are able to sell their products. And these are things we can certainly enable for you.
Thank you, Krishnan. I think thank you for clarifying that. But I must tell you that whenever we've approached Mr. Krishnan for any of those such issues, it's been extremely helpful in terms of ensure, as long as it's the right thing to do, it's always been very, very open. So if you do have issues, I'm sure we can find a solution. And I don't know that you have a question from that gentleman there. Yeah, you want to stand up so that you can get the, or who is the, yeah.
Oh, should I?
Yeah, go ahead if you have a mic. Yes, please. Yeah.
Thank you. No, actually, I'm Abhinav, one of the founders at Fluid AI, so also part of the nasscom Deeptech Council, and speaking later today at 2 p.m. in Ballroom 1 on AI. But Mr. Krishnan, I think it's very impressive to see what the government is doing both with the India AI mission. A lot of the action we're seeing at MeitY's and also is quite phenomenal, right? Very proactive. One of the things as startups that we sometimes struggle with is that, in fact, there are so many schemes, like plethora of schemes running, both from MeitY, from other parts of the government as well. And obviously, depending on the stage we are in, we'll be applicable for some, we might not be applicable for others, some might not be relevant to us. Just going through all of that and figuring out, which direction or which will be the most valuable to us sometimes becomes a struggle. It's a topic we've been discussing in the Deeptech Council as well as one of the key topics when we were surveying and talking to a lot of the startups that they struggle with is that how do they figure out which is the right one? Where is that one place they can go to know everything that the government is doing? Because there's such phenomenal stuff happening. And in conversations, many times you realize, oh, they didn't even know that these schemes exist, or they're struggling with a problem that's already solved, but they didn't know about it.
Yeah, what you say is absolutely right. I mean, there are two things here. This is something that, much to my amusement, I come across sometimes. I was recently at, I think it was Chennai, where we had 3 different startup ecosystems that are funded by MeitY itself. There's one in IIT Madras, there's one in STPI, and there is one in Anna University. And then I found this one startup who was, I was visiting each of them on that day, so they had little, pop-up shows. And so there was this one startup who was there at all these 3 locations. And very proudly, somebody told me that, he's very, very good at this. And, he's got grants worth almost about 3.5 crores from a number of programs, state government programs, central government programs, and so on. So in a way, I really thought that maybe this is a good business model in itself, figuring out, which government program you can get a grant from and just keep running it. But on a more serious note, I think finding the right scheme is not just an issue for startups, but an issue for citizens in general. And that MeitY has tried to solve through 2 portals or 2 applications, which are today, in a sense, a DPI in themselves. One is called the Umang portal in terms of, what are all the programs which are available that has been developed by the National E-Governance Division. And the other is the My Scheme portal, where if you fill in your details, then it actually tells you as to what are the programs which are available. And I understand close to about 2,500 different government schemes of both state and central governments are onboarded there in order to enable you to find what it is. But more importantly, I think it is possible for us to make it easier for startups through a mentoring approach. Since you're in nasscom, and nasscom has in association with MeitY, runs the startup advisory kind of center, a center for excellence. I had an occasion to visit them in Visakhapatnam, and I owe a visit to their center in Bangalore, and I believe the Bangalore center is the most active of them all. There is a fair amount of mentoring. In fact, the nasscom center's uniqueness is it doesn't offer funding, but it actually offers mentoring and other services, and lab and other services, and clearly they would have information for you on which are the programs you can access based on this. Part of the problem here is that different government ministries and then again state governments, see, we periodically have the flavor of the day sort of situation. Currently, startups are a big flavor of the day. The other part of it is skill development. So in this, there are overlapping schemes and opportunities with different ministries actually put together. In MeitY itself, we have about 3 or 4 programs which we offer to 2 or 3 of our own institutions. Likewise, very similar programs are offered by DPIIT, by Department of Science and Technology, and so on. So I have no doubt at all that there is some kind of confusion which can result. For us also, it's very important to overcome this issue and make sure that we focus our strengths. One thing which I have offered as a suggestion, and some of our institutions are already doing, is trying to pool the startups and bring them all together under one umbrella for at least certain events, so that there is an overall coverage. In a place like Bangalore, which is literally the startup capital of India, this may not be necessary, because overall the critical mass has been reached, and probably you need many of these to keep blooming and flowering. But elsewhere in the country, especially in tier 2 and tier 3 locations, we need some of the synergy to be built in order to have a critical mass where enough startups can come up and sort of make their bids, and alternative government programs are offered to them in an umbrella formation. But this is certainly an issue. This is an issue we are grappling with as well. We've had some limited solutions, which I already outlined, but we'll continue to work on this. But maybe there could even be a Deeptech startup which works on this as a longer-term solution for the government. It could be an AI-based solution which we can also pick up and implement in due course.
Thank you, Mr. Krishnan. I know that we ran out of time, so we won't be able to take any more questions. But I do want to give a plug to Sanjeev, who's sitting in the corner. Sanjeev, if you can stand up. So, Mr. Krishnan, thank you for referring to the nasscom COE, which runs, some of the startup enablement that as you saw, and that's what Mr. Krishnan mentioned. So he was very eager and willing to show you the center in person today, but unfortunately he couldn't come. So we'll probably do that probably another day. Sanjeev, but thank you for doing what you're doing. I do want to wrap this up, but I do want to ask one last question to you, Krishnan, before I let you go. I know we talked about a lot of opportunities and with emerging tech and what we can do, but if you pivot a little bit to the risk side of the equation, one major concern is data security, as you know, and cyber security risk broadly. So just as we are focusing on AI with quantum and many other areas, how critical is the focus on cyber security, and what role you think the cyber security startups, which, by the way, there are a bunch of them in the room today, in supporting the government objectives?
I think, I think you hit the right note in terms of what is very, very critical for the country. As the overlay of digital infrastructure grows, the cybersecurity part is something which is becoming more and more important, and something which we have to be very aware of. And the other part of what happens in cybersecurity, and which is why Indian startups are so important for us, is that for cybersecurity solutions, many of them have to be nationalist. There is a threat from practically every international player that cannot be ignored. We are aware that many of our cybersecurity solutions have to be developed domestically and applied domestically, and which is where I think startups play a huge role in the cybersecurity domain. And various entities of MeitY, including certain and including MeitY itself directly, have been funding and have been supporting various cybersecurity startups to design solutions and design applications which we can use more extensively. And and again, the other part of it here is that innovation is constant. The risks are developing all the time, and we can never rest easy. So, which means that this is going to be a very, very evolving and a field where there would continue to be opportunities as we go along. And this is something which has to be primarily domestic, and more domestic-based solutions have to be necessarily found. So I think, one, it is a very critical area of focus, and two, finding the solutions is also extremely important, and most of those solutions are the kind of solutions that startups can offer, innovators can offer, and they have to be offered domestically. So it's both a huge challenge and a huge opportunity.
Great. That's a very profound thought, and I know that it was music to many of the cybersecurity startups in the room. But with that, thank you so much, Krishnan, again for joining us today. I know that you had a busy day and then you couldn't show up here. Hopefully next time we will have you here in person, but really appreciate the fact that you're taking the time to be with us and then address all the questions as well. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Let's give a big round of applause for Mr. Krishnan. Thank you.